How one man betrayed the security of a nation. We are the Spy-Fi guys, and this is Breach.
Welcome back to the Spy-Fi guys, where we cover spy fact, spy fiction, and everything in between. And today we'll be covering Breach, which is a 2002 film starring Ryan Philippe and I forget what the other guy's name is. Chris
Cooper.
Chris Cooper, yeah.
He's been playing a crotchety old guy like his whole career.
Yeah, I think I remember him first from, what was it, October Sky, where he plays the crotchety old dad.
Yeah, like the angry dad who doesn't believe in his son. That's like the only job or role that he has. But he's really good here. He makes the movie. This movie is based on the real life experiences of Eric O'Neill, who we had the privilege of meeting at the Spy Museum last year.
Yeah, we got to see him at the book launch, basically, for his new book. Well, relatively new book right now, Gray Day, which covers pretty much the same topic material, but obviously in much more detail.
And he did a great job telling his story. So if you ever get the chance to see him and you're interested at all on the topic, you should try to find him.
Yeah, and also we would recommend reading the book. And so I read the book, so I'll be sharing some of the things that did or didn't happen, and so what was changed for that.
With that in mind, let's jump right into our plot synopsis from IMDb. FBI upstart Eric O'Neill enters into a power game with his boss, Robert Hanssen, an agent who was put on trial for selling secrets to the Soviet Union.
So, just like the tagline, this is really on the nose and on point of just sort of, wow, this is exactly what it is. Doesn't hide anything.
Well, considering that this is a spy story with a lot of wheeling and dealing and twists and turns, it's a very also straightforward story at the same time. Eric spies on Hanssen, and then, spoiler alert, he catches him.
Yeah. Well, although what I find fascinating, so this movie came out in 2002. Oh no, sorry, 2007. I keep saying 2002. It's actually 2007. And the actual case happened in 2001. So that's only 6 years after the actual events took place. So the fact that they got that moving so quickly, that's impressive.
Yeah, usually they give it a little bit more time, especially if it's like a tragedy or something. I remember when the Boston bombing movie came out, everyone's like, it's too soon, but it wasn't a year later. It was more than that. But that is interesting. I didn't actually make the connection between the fact that it took place at this particular time, because they tell you the year and then the year that it came out.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So should we just jump right in?
Yeah. So the film starts with a newscast. Actually, so I found this fascinating. It basically starts with a newscast announcing that Robert Hanssen was arrested. So automatically we know he's going to get arrested.
Yeah, we know the ending. And usually with, like in Valkyrie, they just tell you it with like text on a screen, which I guess that's something they like to do with these historical movies, is not to keep you guessing. I would have rather just have had that, though. I don't feel like the news footage really added too much to it. Except, hey, John Ashcraft, I vaguely remember him.
Right. Yeah, so yeah, we see him walking out of church. And so I appreciated that pretty much all of this seems like it was filmed in DC proper, because I definitely see parts, places I recognize, or, oh, hey, I know where that is.
It definitely looks familiar, and I'll mention this later, but there's a part where it shows FBI headquarters and the Metro bus passes in front of it, and it was one of those old Metro buses that they had when I first moved here. The ones that were like the cab over engine, you had to like climb up into them.
Oh, I don't think I was when I moved here.
Those?
Yeah.
No, you definitely were here at the same time. You just may not remember them. They were like the one that had like the flat front.
I don't know.
I'll send you a picture of it when we're
right.
So Hanssen leaves church, and we get based on a true story, which I appreciate because it is. Just say it. That's what it is. And we see Eric O'Neill surveilling an Arab couple. That's how we meet him.
Yeah, so he's taking photos of that couple, and he sees them arguing, and so he goes back to his team in the van, and he says, yeah, I can turn her. They're arguing. He notices that they have this report that he compiled titled Proposal for Subject Database System, which apparently is going to change the way that how they store information.
Yeah, and that sort of is something that kind of goes in and out throughout the movie, is that they keep bringing it up and it doesn't seem to go anywhere. Excuse me. But one thing that struck me about this part was someone says to him, "You're trying to make Agent, aren't you?"
Mm-hmm.
So already I have questions. I
Yeah.
thought if you wanted to be an FBI agent, you applied to the FBI, you get your job, they send you there, and off you go. So, like, what is Eric's job that he has to get promoted into becoming an agent?
So he was, I mean, he's an FBI employee, so he's not necessarily an agent yet.
But like, what is his job then? Like
His job,
surveillance drone?
basically. So he was an operative. He was a counterintelligence and counterterrorism field operative. So he was not an agent.
Okay.
So you don't get to be agent immediately. Basically, is what, from my understanding of it.
Yeah, I guess it's like a promotion. They also may have changed it. I don't know. Okay, so Eric goes home and he shares his work with his East German wife. Well, not all of it, a little bit of it.
Yeah, so that one I kind of was like, how much of this should be he be telling her?
Well, I mean, I imagine that they gave him a hard time whenever they first got together. I would have liked to have learned more about it, but they never go over it. Or they never explain
if you
it.
read the book, they actually go over this sort of, apparently he, and this was kind of, this may be why he hasn't made, part of why he hasn't made agent yet.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have it cleared to marry her even though she was an East German national.
Wait, I'm sorry, he wasn't cleared to marry her?
No, he just sort of did it.
I wasn't aware that you needed to be cleared to marry somebody.
Well, if they are a foreign national, you do.
Well, I sort of thought that, like, yeah, you can go ahead and marry them, but then they'll give you a hard time. It's like forgiveness versus permission. Like, you don't have to ask permission, but you may have to ask.
If you're working for any of those intel agencies, from what I understand.
I see. That is interesting. Then then Eric gets his mission.
Mm-hmm.
And we learn that Hanssen is, quote, a sexual deviant who posts lurid material on the internet. Oh, those were the days.
So not only that, so what he also is being told is he's being tasked to HQ to Hanssen, and that he's going to be working in the new Information Assurance Division, which is basically cyber intelligence.
Except don't they say later that it doesn't actually exist?
Yes, but they would later actually form a cyber intelligence division because they didn't actually have one at that time.
And then they also make a point here that Hanssen spent the last 20 years taking on Russian spies.
Mm-hmm.
So Eric's asked to spy on Hanssen, which is not a job I would want.
Yeah, so he's given a pager and he's has to report directly to Kate Burrows, who's played by Laura Linney.
Mm-hmm.
And he has to keep a journal of who Hanssen meets, who calls, etc.
So I know that he did surveillance, but what exactly qualifies him to be an up-close and personal spy in a very, very profile, high-stakes kind of operation like this?
So basically, well, from how I understand it, they needed someone, who knows computers, who, I mean, the Catholic part helps too, and they go over this later in the film, and they also need someone who Hanssen wouldn't know. So for that, you have to go straight to the well to someone who's new. And also, yeah, he's got, I don't know how many years of experience sort of tracking people. It's known as a ghost. Someone who tracks surveillance agents, who tracks people.
Okay. It just struck me watching it without knowing all the background is that he jumped from taking pictures of people in a car to spying, which is quite the difference. He doesn't actually have to interact with the people that he was surveying before.
True. So, I mean, knowing that he was not just surveillance, he was counterintelligence. So. Mm-hmm. Which is a bit more than that.
Yep. So also just a couple of things I noticed here is that he gets off at Archive Station, which is a real station. It's not like House of Cards where they made up a metro station.
You mean like how they constantly have, in movies, Georgetown Metro Station?
Right.
Not a thing.
Yeah.
Apparently the metro signs were different in 01. Well, like above the metros themselves, not the standing stations, not standing, poles, but the ones that would right above the escalators. Like, that doesn't look the same as it does now, but I'm sure that's just what it looked like back then.
I didn't even notice that one. I like don't see them when I take the metro normally. So also at this point, Lumberg from Office Space makes an appearance.
Yeah, so he's Rich Garces, who gives him all of his ID cards and passes, and Eric asks him for advice, what's he like? He's like, well, just, take nothing personally.
Yeah. There's probably good advice no matter where you are or who you're working with. We get to see that working at the FBI isn't so glamorous. There's not much to the office.
Mm-hmm. And so This room, I believe it's called what 9930. So that is, I believe, if I remember from reading the book, that is actually the office number that at least is stated in the book. So it's probably correct. But
I'm glad they got that right.
FBI headquarters is a maze. So even if you know that number, you're not gonna be able to find that.
Oh darn! I was hoping to take a picture of it. So we meet Hanssen, and he's a big presence that looms through the movie, and he asks Eric to tell him 4 things about yourself that are true and 1 false thing.
So it's basically 2 truths and a lie with more things.
And it's supposed to be like you're actually trying to deceive the person instead of just having fun.
I mean, 2 truths and a lie. You are trying to deceive the person.
I don't try.
I try to. Oh, I try.
Okay, tell me 2 truths and a lie right now.
Right now? All right.
Yeah.
I went to space camp 2 times. I didn't get my driver's license till I was 19, and I've been to 4 out of the 5 Disney parks.
Okay, this is bad because I know that you've been to Disney parks. This is like one of those true or false tests where it's like a tiny little difference. I think you've only been to space camp once.
Wrong.
Dang it. I knew you've been to space camp.
Yeah, so the license part was a lie. I was 23.
Okay. Yeah, that I knew it was going to be some kind of minute detail like that.
Yeah.
Well, so Hanssen asked him that, right? Because to show how good he is at like seeing through people, right?
Yeah. So I've got Eric's 5 things. Oh, and I just realized if anyone listens to this podcast that we know, I can't use those for my 2 truths and a lie because those are like my default ones.
I don't think anybody's going to remember.
All right, so here's his 5 things. I won Boy Scout merit badges in every category except riflery. I haven't been to confession since high school. There are several words that I constantly misspell. My favorite drink is a vodka tonic. And I'm the only male in my last 4 generations of my family not to serve in the military.
And then that last one's pretty significant, I think, because it tells you a little bit about his history.
Yeah.
And so but doesn't he not tell him the 5 things right then and there? He tells him.
No, it's a little bit later. Like 20 minutes later. So, but apparently the lie is that his drink of choice is not vodka tonic, but scotch. And then Hanssen gives this line. It's against bureau policy for an agent to consume alcohol even off duty because an FBI agent is always on duty. But as far as I can tell, that's not true.
Well, so I wondered about this as well. And I Googled it. And what they said is that you can drink alcohol off duty if you're an FBI agent, but but don't get like hammered.
Yeah, you shouldn't drink to excess.
I mean, well, they're not like Batman who like never drinks. But of course, we see what happens when they do. Sometimes they try to do a flip in a nightclub and then their gun goes off and it's a whole thing. Remember that story?
I do. Hanssen tells Eric about how he wants to reinvent how the Bureau stores information. There's a great line when Eric addresses him as Mr. Hanssen. He's like, "Your name is Clerk, and my name is Sir, or Boss, if you can manage. If I ever catch you going to my office again, you're going to be pissing purple for a week."
Yeah, that was crazy. That, first of all, that he immediately figured out that Eric was going through his office. And second, that the consequences weren't worse than that. Because he'd been spying for a while, right? And you think it's like a coincidence that you get put in a place and your guy immediately starts searching through your stuff?
Yeah, I mean, so he was suspicious, but he wasn't. And they talk about this in the book, that the line between suspicion and paranoia, and once you cross over into that line, there's no coming back, and that's hard to. Yeah, and that once they cross into paranoia, then it's like impossible to try to catch them.
Well, yeah, he got really lucky then, and that in a lot of ways. I also had a thought about Hanssen wanting to restructure the data, the way the FBI stores information. So I think the whole point of this movie is that Hanssen is a man of many contradictions. So he served loyally in the US, except he didn't because he was a spy. He was religious, but he's like a sex pervert. And he's really nice, except when he's not. And in this case, he is a traitor, but he also still wants to make the FBI better. And also, I thought it was kind of dumb because it's like, you think if you're a spy and you've been getting away with being a spy for a long time, you wouldn't do anything to draw attention to yourself.
True, but you'd still try to do your job. And I mean, for him, And they talk about this in the very end. It's all about ego. So we go over, we can talk about the four uh, reasons that people will, betray their country. So it's money, ideology, coercion, and
Mhm.
ego. And for Hansen, it's pure ego. It's knowing the fact that he is smarter than everyone else.
Well, yeah, I mean that's true. That's sort of what they say about criminals too. Is that like the smart criminals don't get caught, and that's why you hear all these stories about dumb criminals getting caught. And probably Hansen, he could have not been caught if he had just been smarter. It's
Hmm.
probably safe to say. It's not
Yeah.
like there weren't warning signs. We see them throughout the movie.
Yeah. So, and then as Eric and Hansen are talking more, he notices he asks who the pager's for, and Eric lies and says that the pager's for his wife, and mentions that she's, an East German, lapsed Protestant, not a Catholic, which Hansen, being a very strong Catholic, doesn't necessarily like.
Hmm.
And so after his first day, Kate calls Eric at home, asking for her pages of notes. And Eric says that he just started writing them up because Hansen kept him there until 10 p.m., which is ridiculous.
Well, I don't know. Is it ridiculous? I mean, these people are crime fighters.
True, but they're not doing any active investigations. They're forming a new department.
It's probably safe to say, based on the context, that Eric's not used to being when he's in an office staying there that late. And
True.
apparently his wife isn't used to it either because she gets mad. By the way, I guess
Hmm.
it now seems like a good time to mention it. I didn't like all the stuff with his wife. It was annoying. It was like
I
it's
thought
always
no. Well, so I
confusing.
thought it gave. Well, first of all, it gave it him grounding because, all right, your average viewer is not going to be understand necessarily what he's thinking, whereas if you have the wife in there, gives the outsider perspective of, oh, this is all seems crazy, so it gives you that in.
That's actually a good point. One of my favorite parts was in the middle where Eric's like kind of going nuts because he can't keep all these lies straight, and like
Hmm.
his wife's mad at him, and everyone's mad at him. So that's true. That was good. So we want to keep
And
the
I
wife
mean,
around for that.
so the one thing they don't actually talk about in this is not only is he doing these things, he's also doing law school at the same time, night classes.
Wow, they did not mention that.
No, but if you read the book, plug. Um, they talk about how he's having to balance all of this while doing law school and night classes at the same time.
Well, something else I thought was crazy to me is that he could do pages of notes every day.
Hmm.
And it's not like he can sit there and take
No,
notes
so he
while
has to
Hanson's there.
memorize all of this. So he has an incredible memory.
Well, that's why he's a spy and we're
Hmm.
not. Okay, so what's going? Where are we at? So
So we get the new presidential portraits being put on the wall as the year
yes.
changes. So this means that it has to happen in like early January of 2001. So right after George W. Bush gets elected.
hmm I also have here that you have a conversation where the FBI is a gun culture. The intel side isn't taken
Hmm.
seriously.
Yeah. So Hansen finds a copy of Eric's report and said it was ignored because he doesn't shoot. And they have this great line about how every director comes from the law enforcement side, guys who shoot, who make arrests. Never been a director from the intel side, never will be. And I looked into this between then and now. Yeah, none of them have been intel. They've all either been appointments who are like lawyers or something, or they were from the law enforcement side.
Well, I'm not surprised. That was sort of that is the original purpose of the FBI still.
Hmm.
So I don't see it as like a discrimination thing. It just makes sense, you know.
I see it as the people the intel side really, and this is true for like most spies, you're never going to hear about when they succeed, other than this case. You're going to hear about when they fail.
Right. That is true. Also, something that occurs to me here is I remembered it. I had a conversation with an FBI agent a long time ago, and he mentioned at one point about the analysis side, which I
Hmm.
guess is like the intel side. And he was like, "Yeah, I had an analyst. He was my analyst. He did a good job." I was like, "That sounds a little like paternalistic." And it's not like we worked together. It's like he worked for me.
Hmm. So we also find out at this point that Eric's mom has Parkinson's, and he's been reading a book on Parkinson's,
Hmm
to figure out how to deal with it. And then they go into an elevator as they're heading out somewhere, and there's an attractive lady in there, and Eric makes a comment about her and sort of trying to bait Hanssen because he still thinks that he's watching him because he's a sexual deviant.
Mhm.
But he doesn't take the bait. He's like, you're married. And God expects you to live your faith at all times. He said, besides, I don't like women, and I don't approve of pantsuits. The world doesn't need more Hillary Clintons.
Ayo, she's still relevant now.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I feel like that's totally Hanssen overcompensating.
Maybe, but also I believe. I mean, I can also believe with his very conservative viewpoints, seemingly. I can see him being not a fan.
But then what's with all this stuff on the internet then?
Well, and I mean, they cover it briefly, but all of his stuff on the internet was writing up stories about his wife.
Oh, I didn't realize that was all of his activity. I thought that was just part of it.
There was that. There was also, the filming real thing that happened without her knowledge. And, he was a creepo, just put it mildly.
Okay. So we get a little bit of tech jargon. All I have is a note is like tech jargon.
Yeah, so Hanssen's consulting with Rich Garces about how to improve their information systems. I also did not write down any of this because it's like all over my head in terms of tech.
Even 15 years ago or whatever.
Yeah. But I did like the line about how he programmed. He wrote a program using ones and zeros, entirely uncrackable, last night just to see if I could do it. And you're the one who gets the corner office or the office with a window. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like resentment. That sounds familiar.
Exactly. It's all about the ego, baby.
So then we meet. Is this the part where we meet more people involved in the investigation?
Not quite yet. So Eric,
Okay.
He tells Eric to set up meetings with the system managers, CIA, NSA, DIA. And this is where they go past an office where Hanssen says that, there's a task force in there looking for a mole. And Hanssen says that, they're looking for a CIA officer, and they would never give someone who's from the Bureau. And he gives this great line. So cooperation is counter-operational. And that's the mentality. Of course, the enemies of this country aren't so picky. They'll work with anyone who shares their hatred of us.
Well, so that's the thing. So have you read The Looming Tower or watched it on Hulu?
I have not.
So we'll cover it. It's really good. It's really good. It's perfect for this. However, I read the book The Looming Tower a while ago, and the thesis of it is that the reason why 9/11 happened, it wasn't prevented, was because the CIA and the FBI didn't cooperate. So
I can believe that.
It's something that was a problem in the past and will continue to be a problem in the future. But it's not just because of egos. So the way the author explains it is because, so let's say the U.S. knows about a terrorist. Okay, so the CIA knows about this terrorist, and they're like, we're going to track him, and we could tell the FBI that he's a terrorist. But if we do, the FBI will immediately arrest him, and then we won't be able to see where he goes, because that's the way the FBI operates. Except
in this case.
Right. I mean, like when it comes to counterterrorism, this is counterintelligence. It's a little different.
Fair.
But the point is, it's a very relevant topic that I think we're going to continue to see as we do these spy fact stories.
Interesting. All right. Anyway, so we move on, and Hanssen asks Eric to steal one of Rich's paintings, Two Men on a Boat.
He's like, I want it. Go get it for me.
And actually, in my mind, I thought we actually see him steal it, but rewatching it this time, no, we actually never see the painting itself. Like, it's never brought up until the very end.
That's true. Yeah, there's a lot of callbacks and stuff, like the Four Truths and a Lie, and then this painting as well. So we didn't mention this earlier, but he also gets Eric to steal computers for them. So it's pretty open and shut loyalty test, I think.
Yeah.
Of course, he's going to do it because he needs to get in with Hanssen. But I think the reason why Hanssen asked him to do it was to see if he would be willing to break the rules for him.
And this is the point where we, meet Kate and the task force working on tracking. Well, actually, we see them. So just in like little clips of them sort of working on tracking his movements. And then Hanssen meets Eric outside of his apartment and takes him to morning mass. And he says, "You know why the Soviet Empire failed? Godlessness."
I'm sure that's the reason.
Well, I mean, that's part of why we have "In God We Trust" on our money.
That's true, is to differentiate ourselves from the atheist Soviets.
Mm-hmm.
So, hey, who's to say that he's wrong?
Hmm. I
Okay.
mean, well, let's not get into that.
So anyway, so moving forward, I have a point that Eric is getting well. He's been nervous. He continues
Mhm.
to think he's not the right guy for the job.
So first they meet. He gets a page from Kate, and they meet in HBI and FBI headquarters,
Mhm.
and they're talking openly about this case. They're actually talking about it where the running track is in the building. I'm like, that seems like a terrible place to discuss the case.
Well, even if they weren't discussing it, somebody like I don't get the impression that Hansen was the most popular guy around. But what if
Yeah.
somebody had like seen Eric talking to him and be
Hmm.
like, "Hey,
They have no reason to know each other. So I'm like,
yeah,
yeah. But he says that but Kate tells them that they're trying to get Hanson out of the office for a few hours at some point, and after that meeting, that's when we go back to the Hanson or to Eric's apartment,
mhm,"
and Juliana's there. She's making food, and he asks her to come to church.
which of course he does. He does that so much.
Hmm. And so she goes, and feels awkward the whole time. You could just sort of tell that on her face. And they go to family lunch at the Hanson's house afterwards. And Eric is sneaking around Hanson's office, looks at his browser history.
Every man's worst nightmare.
And apparently, I paused it at this point. So it's a lot of church stuff, and then one site that's about being anti-Clinton.
Okay.
I was like, ooh, oof.
Yeah, but nothing too. The point is nothing too like
Yeah, there was
damning.
nothing. Yeah, and so at this point, he still thinks it's about being, a sexual deviant, and so he's like,
Mm.
"There's nothing here." And Eric, and Hanson catches him and says, Eric's like, "Sorry, I was snooping." He's like, "No, and he's surprisingly fine about it. But it's not. But I think he was just thought he was just sort of looking around the office, not like looking at his browser history.
Which is
And
so interesting because the way you reacted at the work versus at home.
well, that means that he's probably has something at work, whereas he's not going to have anything like this at home.
Yeah.
And Hanson actually does something nice. He gives Eric this like full-on report that he printed out about Parkinson's,
Nice.
since his mother's dealing with that. And Hanson talks about how he'll be 57 in 2 months, which is mandatory retirement age for the bureau. And at this point is when Eric meets with Kate, and he says he wants to be read in on this case. He wants to know what they have because he doesn't feel like it's a case. And they're meeting here at Archives Metro, like outside Archives Metro. I'm like,
Mm.
again, this is a terrible place to be having this meeting.
So yeah, that's something that every spy movie does, and I don't get it. But I guess it's like where else would they meet? Like at her office?
mm. Somewhere not in the public, where because he's like shouting.
Yeah. Well, I don't you feel like that's more Hollywood? Well, I mean, you read the
Mm.
book. Did they specify where he was meeting with Kate?
So they actually mention that there's a like at one point they go to a restaurant in Crystal City that has like at a rooftop, or not a rooftop, but it's in like on the top floor of a building. I'm like, I wonder where that is. And I'm like, I wonder because it was like an Indian place. I'm like, I don't know of any place like that in Crystal City.
Well, if it's anywhere like my neighborhood, it's probably long closed.
This is true, probably. Yeah. So, but finally, Kate reads him in, tells him, he's a traitor, Eric. He started spying for the Russians, we think, in 1985. Gave them military secrets, gave them the continuity plan for the president and the vice president. Gave them agents they turned who were later executed by the KGB. And here's the thing about, and they never talk about this in the movie, about Hansen. So and you'll notice this movie's set in 2001, obviously long after the fall of the KGB.
Mhm.
So as the fall of the Soviet Union was happening, he went to ground and only resurfaced once again once the SVR, which is the successor of the KGB, was set up.
So much for quitting while you're ahead.
Yeah, so he went to ground for 5 years or something like that, and then came up again when he needed money again, basically.
And that's something I also wanted to know, which was why did Hansen need all this money? It's not like he had like an extravagant lifestyle.
No, and that's the thing. He didn't take that much money. Like he didn't go
Uh-huh.
for it was, and he was really smart. Well, so first of all, they never knew who he was. They didn't know that he was explicitly Robert Hanssen. Unlike Aldrich Ames, who they talk about later, Aldrich Ames approached them like in person, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Hansen sent a message, never always used a code name, never revealed his true identity, but gave him enough information to know that he was real. And so he never revealed himself until they missed the drop, basically.
That's pretty tricky.
Yeah.
Talking about playing both sides.
Mm-hmm. So anyways, going back to the movie, at this point, he gets brought in. He sees the whole division who's working on this case. He finds out that the FBI director is the person who's running point on the case, and that he wants Hansen caught in the act, which would give him the death sentence.
Yeah,
And
the Allstate guy says we can't just arrest him in case he goes free and spills more.
Mm-hmm. And Rich, is in on the case as well. And this is the part where, okay, and you're gonna have to forgive me this rant, but
Mm-hmm.
this seems so. You already know that he's a spy.
Right.
He's given up stuff, and
What
yet
sort of stuff? Like giving up
agents.
information. I thought you meant like gave up his soul or something.
No, giving up agents.
Uh-huh.
And you put him in charge of put him in charge of a division, and give him access to basically all the secrets of the FBI because you want to catch him.
But it's a fake division, I thought.
Yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
From reading the book, my interpretation was yes, it was a fake division, but he still had access to everything and access, like when he sets up these meetings to the DIA, CIA, NSA, they don't know that he's potentially the spy. They think he's really working. So they give him all this access. People will watch Mission Impossible movies and they think it's ridiculous that, all right, Ethan Hunt is willing to potentially give away the knock list or whatever just to catch whoever's behind it. And it's like, no, that's completely irresponsible. This is exactly as irresponsible as what they let Eric Hansen do. They gave him all this information so they could catch him in the act, and just trusted in the fact that they know that they will catch him before he makes that last drop.
Yeah, it's a lot of luck.
So it's next time someone argues that Ethan Hunt's a gambler and he's risking way too much. It's like, this is exactly what our intelligence organizations do.
Yeah, they risk a lot more than any of that. Also, I would say that if they just cut off his information, he would know that he was blown.
True. But yeah, so it's just like that. When I realized that, I was like, this is weirdly enough in some ways that those plots of Mission Impossible, not as where he does something like risky, not as far off from the truth as you might think.
Yeah, it's stuff like, give me the codex or I'll kill your friends.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, so we cut to Eric, and he's reading all the files.
Mm-hmm.
And also we find out apparently that a couple of years ago, the Bureau put together a task force to find the mole. And they put Hansen in charge of the task force because he was, the best counter intel guy with the Russians.
Very ironic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The kind of stuff that can only happen in real life.
Yeah. So as Eric's, reading the files, we get the voiceover from Hansen. And this is actually, I mentioned how they, the Soviets or Russians missed a drop. So that you get a dropped reference for that in there. He said, I don't like missing stuff. And and so actually, part of what put the FBI onto Hansen is that he never made he never made phone calls or anything like this. It was all done either electronically or through letters.
Mm-hmm.
And the only time he made a call was when they missed a drop, and he identified himself as Ramon Garcia. And during this, he actually he mentioned he used the phrase "pissing purple," which people knew Hansen used. And that's part of what that helped identify him at first.
Oh my gosh, that's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Are you being serious right now?
I'm serious.
Why would you say like something really distinctive sounding?
Because he was pissed because he wanted his money.
Well, they make the point here that he's smarter than all of us, but all you need to do is stress. Some days all you need to do is stress him a little bit, and it starts getting dumb.
Yeah. So, and then they have they have a meeting with the DIA, and they're trying to get him out of the office for about 3 hours.
Mhm.
Well, that's the next day, and as Eric's reading all this, he goes home and he finds Juliana at home, and Hansen and his wife Bonnie are at the apartment, and they had made dinner, and it's just super awkward.
This seems very Hollywood that they would just show up at his
Hmm.
house.
Yeah.
And but I
Well,
guess his
yes
wife is
and
like a
no.
pushover. I guess his wife is like
Yeah,
a pushover. She's like, okay.
and also I feel like his Hansen's wife seemed very pushy.
Oh yeah.
Hmm.
So
Because they
also,
drop a line that apparently his wife is the person who converted him to Catholicism,
yeah.
and so she seems very pushy and very, I don't know. So who knows?
So something else I liked at this part was Hansen asks where Eric was, and he says we couldn't reach you on your pager.
Hmm.
Of course, a pager that doesn't actually exist.
No,
Well,
the pager
it exists, but not for his wife. His wife won't have
exists.
the number.
Right, right.
So that was great because I couldn't tell whether or not Hansen was like trying to probe for like to see if that was a lie or not.
Hmm. Yeah.
And then we also have that awkward scene where she's like, where is it is his wife who was like, let's say grace and talk about
Yeah.
having kids, and it's also really awkward.
Yeah, and so after that, Eric and Juliana have a fight. That basically, and Juliana's totally in the right. They're crossing some huge boundaries coming in, and we get a line later that apparently they were talking to Juliana about Opus Dei, which is a super conservative sect of Catholicism.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly are right to. She's certainly right to be upset that they just show up at her house. I mean, that's
Hmm. Yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Even back then. So, did the book have any insight about Hansen's wife?
Not so much. No.
Because obviously she wasn't a spy as well, or else we would
No.
know
Well, yeah,
about
no,
it.
she does. She was not. No, she claims that she. So this is from some of the exhibit in the Spy Museum. They claims that, or she says that she knew nothing about any of this, and that when he was sentenced, she thought that was appropriate, and that's how he should have been sentenced. So I think she was not happy about that when she found out.
What about the sex stuff?
What whether.
Did you know about that?
No, she didn't. From what I know, no. But it's not. I don't have too much detail on it.
Okay. All right. So what have we got next?
So,
So there's a confrontation between Eric and Juliana about not just the Hansons being ridiculous, but also about him lying to her.
hmm.
And he can't tell her anything, but he can't tell her that he can't tell her the life of a
Hmm.
spy. And she wants him to quit.
Hmm.
So, thoughts?
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's just. I can totally see Juliana's side on this.
Well, yeah, but on the other hand, she's like, I'm not an FBI kind of wife. It's like, well, don't you feel like she kind of knew what she signed up for?
I mean, well, so I'm trying. I don't remember the exact timeline of when they got married.
Mm,
Well, I guess no, no. They were. He was already like in the FBI because, as I said, there was that the hubbub about him getting married without sort of clearing it.
right. Did the book have any sort of insights into her eventually getting on board with him having the FBI as a career?
Well, I mean, and this is a spoiler for later in the podcast. We know that he quits,
He does eventually quit, right?
but it's literally right after this. So
Okay.
yeah.
So it's like just hang in there until this one more case before retirement.
Well, I mean, like I think it's not that she doesn't know that. It's just as they're dealing through all this, Eric realizes, and so does she, that this is not the life they want. Eric goes to see his dad, asks if his dad ever quit anything. He's like, I quit. I think I quit a paper route once.
His dad is played by Senator Kelly from the original X-Men movie.
Yes. Who's what's his name? Bruce Davidson.
Mm.
Hmm.
They also have a conversation about the military tradition of Eric's family,
Hmm.
and how he's serving his country in his own way, unlike
Yeah.
everybody else. Here's the thing about the old Metro bus is an establishing shot of the FBI building. That's where it is. He
I'll
also
have
has
to go back and watch that.
yeah. Eric also has a bathroom conversation with Lumberg.
Mm.
And then we get a really something right out of a spy movie
Yeah.
where he spills water on the spot in his tie.
Yeah, so Eric is telling Hansen that, I screwed up and your 25-year photo session is today, not next week. And yeah, so like you said, he spills the water on the floor as an excuse to stay in the office.
Right.
And as Hansen is taking his photo, Eric is copying the Palm Pilot. And so Hansen is having his photo taken, and he is not enjoying this whole thing.
So Eric told us this story in person as part of his talk, and I feel like it's different in the movie.
It is different, and we can cover this when we get to spy fact versus spy fiction.
Okay, sounds good.
But yeah, so Eric, Hansen leaves the photographer early, and as this is happening, Rich catches him and challenges him to a shootout in the range.
So this is something Eric told us about. Also, one quick thing about him leaving the photo session is right before he leaves, the photographer says, "Think patriotic thoughts."
Yes, I enjoyed that.
Yeah, do you think that's a coincidence? Or
no, I think that was no, I think that was coincidence. So Eric finishes copying the Palm Pilot, and he puts it back in the bag, and he's sitting, he goes back to his desk, and he's like, "Oh crap, did I put it in the right pocket? I don't know." So he grabs it, goes back into the office, swinging it around, and is like, "Which way is it? Which way?" So he's like, "All right, it's too late. I can hear him coming in. We can just put it in a pocket." And then Eric pretends to be praying in Hansen's office when Hansen comes in.
Okay, so I have many thoughts on this. So first of all, sorry, I'm going to be like a Monday morning quarterback because I can't remember anything. I write everything down. But Eric, we have established that he's good at remembering things. So how can you not remember which pocket to put it back in? I mean, are you
look at
being
the
serious?
bag. There are 4 identical pockets.
Okay, but you just, I don't know, we have like a note card or like a sticky note or something.
A sticky note that could be found, and then you could say, why do you have a note saying which pocket my Palm Pilot is in?
I like to think that it was possible for him to remember it, but whatever. I won't talk too much smack. He did save our country.
Well, I'll go through this more in detail in our spy fact versus spy fiction section.
Okay. But then the praying thing, I was like, why would he be praying? I can't believe Hansen bought the praying thing.
So it works because I think what was that?
The cross is in his office and not
that too, but there was also something right in that confrontation right before, where he talks about you should pray more, and so it works.
Apparently it did work, but
Yeah.
I found it ridiculous. That's fine.
So this is when they have their meeting at DIA, and Eric drives them there.
Well, there's a moment of truth when Hansen looks through the bag.
Right, yeah.
And the audience holds their breath, and he asks if he moved the briefcase.
And he says, yes, because I needed to move it because the water was everywhere.
So yet another close call in a movie full of them. Okay, so then they go to DIA, and this is another story that Eric told us about how he insisted on being the one to drive Hansen because his allies were searching Hansen's car.
Mm-hmm. And so the DIA meeting ends up, getting cut short because the person who, and I did wonder about this, is like, did the DIA know, the person who is supposed to know that it was Hansen's being investigated, and maybe that's why they had to reschedule their meeting. But I'm like, no, FBI wouldn't necessarily tell someone else that they were investigating one of their own.
But this would be a good opportunity. This is a case, if you could make it work, where intelligence sharing would have been pretty helpful. It's like, hey, have your meeting and have it go on forever.
True.
As meetings do in the workplace, and he'll be too polite to leave.
Yeah.
I mean, not Hansen, but somebody would. Also, during this part, the FBI agents somehow get into Hansen's car. I always kind of wondered how they did that. I mean, they are crime fighters, so they have their way. But they find like an arsenal in his trunk.
Yeah, which was kind of crazy.
But it never comes back. If this were like a Hollywood movie, the end would be like having a shootout with 50 cops.
Right. Eric knows that they did not take nearly enough time to get back as they needed. So Eric tells him, let's take the Parkway instead of E Street. I was SGC. I know, streets.
Mm. This is like a classic spy movie thing too, where the one character like insists that his target do this thing, and the target's like, "What the heck is wrong with you?" And then it's like, "Why do you care so much about which direction we take?"
Yeah.
How do you think this? Unfortunately, it's a good thing that GPSs didn't exist back then, because you'd be like, I'm going to do what the GPS says. Also, at this part, the Kennedy Center is in the background.
Mm-hmm. So in the book, and it's actually, he decides to go on M Street through Georgetown instead of saying the Parkway, which I definitely believe there's never not traffic in Georgetown.
No way. It's impossible. It had to be like a 28 Days Later kind of situation.
So I'm wondering why they changed it to the Parkway instead of M Street, and maybe it's just because of M Street being M Street, you just can't film in Georgetown.
Yeah. Not unless you're Wonder Woman 1984. They film there.
Hanssen is pissed that wow, great job. And he calls him like a series of insults.
Mm-hmm.
And he decides, I can either sit here for 30 minutes, or I could cross over and take a 5-minute cab.
Yeah.
So he starts walking, and there's a group, bunch of people tailing them, and they let Kate know that they're going, that they're coming. And so Eric's like, all right, gets out of the car too, and gives some half truths about Juliana, him fighting, which is true, and that's about him, and then says that I want to go past the Catholic bookshop again, so give her some books.
Yeah, really playing that Catholic card.
Mm-hmm. But it works, yeah.
Yeah, well, he knows how to get to Hanssen. So Hanssen's like, okay. When you put it that way. But is this the part where he says, swear to God that everything you just told me is true? And then Eric won't do it.
Eric won't do it, and I listened to exactly what he said. So he said, he said, I'm not gonna, use that and swear to that. I'm telling you the truth. We are having fights, and this. I was like, the two things he mentioned, but didn't specifically mention about wanting to go to the bookstore.
Yes. Well, probably once you're at the bookstore now. Well, so this, we've tried about this before, but we had, back when I first went to Spy Museum stuff, one of the first things we did was there was like a party social with real life spies. Do you remember that?
I do.
And I asked one of them, like, how do you lie? Basically. And he said, what you have to do is convince yourself in the moment that it's true. And this seems like a case where he could have done that. Yeah.
So Hanssen gets back in the car, and they drive back to FBI headquarters. And then we cut to a scene where Eric is... So earlier, Hanssen had put, a package in Eric's outbox for him to send off. But Eric, took it, and apparently there's a VHS in there. And for our younger listeners who may not remember what a VHS is, it's like an older DVD.
It only plays one thing, and you have to rewind it. So it's a tape of Bonnie. It's a porn of Bonnie. And it was a little bit funny when he comes home and he finds his wife watching the tape.
First of all, if that's happening, why would you watch that at home?
Yeah, well, I'm sure it's probably kind of hard to get it. If the FBI was anything like my elementary school, it's pretty hard to get a TV with a VCR attached to it.
All right, fair. But also, why would you leave the cassette in the VCR? Oh, actually, no, never mind. He doesn't leave it in, because we later see Juliana putting the VCR or VHS in the VCR.
Regardless, he left it somewhere where she could find it, which is like, the one thing you don't want to leave lying around is your porn. Come on. So then, and she makes the point that everybody told me when you marry the Bureau, things get weird.
Not like this, though.
Well, I'm not sure who everybody is, but whatever. And she says, telling me the truth about him would mean betraying your country or something. It's like, apparently, yes.
So what I got, she's handling this a lot calmer than I thought she would.
I don't know. I'm sort of of two minds about it, because it's not like he ever said, I'm doing this undercover investigation. He's just he's like, I have a case So I'm inclined
No,
to
but I
agree
mean,
with
so
you.
for example, I'm just saying, if you found your husband watching a tape of his boss and his boss's wife having sex, I feel like there'd be more blowout from that.
Yeah, that is true. Well, I mean, her reaction in that case, I think, is not only good but very on point, where she's like, "Things get weird," and it is weird. So there you go. I did like the point where he says, "I think my wife just read herself into the case."
Yeah. So, and they don't ever explicitly say that Eric tells her what's going on.
Not as far as I could tell.
Yeah.
I did like the part where Burroughs yells at him for watching the tape and says he should have just mailed it.
Right, right. So,
But I guess characters following the procedure and doing everything they're supposed to do is a little boring. Conflict is the essence of drama.
yeah. So they're back, and so the next day in the office, Hansen tells Eric that he's bringing his car into his mechanic in Manassas, and that Eric needs to pick
Mhm.
him up in the morning. And he thinks his car is bugged, and that is setting off radio bursts, so car alarms will go off as he drives past and other stuff.
Yeah, that would be enough to make anybody suspicious, I
Hmm.
think. I mean, signal bursts, car
Yeah,
alarms.
and
What if he thinks
Hansen.
it's the Russians, though?
Yeah, well, he tells Eric he thinks it's the Russians, but he's getting suspicious that the FBI is onto him.
Hmm. Which, of course, they are.
Yeah.
So we also find Hansen watching a movie that looks like porn.
No, it's Entrapment, starring Catherine Zeta-Jones and Sean Connery.
It looked like porn to me.
No, it's a scene in the movie where, and I mean, I don't know if I ever cover this because it's more about thieves and spies, but yeah,
Mhm.
Sean Connery, sneaks into Catherine Zeta-Jones's room or her room, and she's there, sleeping. That's why it
Right.
looked like that.
Okay. So then we get the reveal that Hansen is going to stop spying. He's doing one last job before retirement, and the heroes are up a creek.
Yes. Well, no. So it's not even that he's going to do one last job. It's that he is just going to go to ground, and
Mhm.
he's not even going to make another drop.
Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
so
You're
that
right. At first, he's just not. He's going to stop.
yeah. So and so apparently if he doesn't make another drop, they don't have enough to arrest him to make him talk. Like they
Hmm.
might get him 5 years, but nothing enough to put him away permanently.
Right.
But Eric, so we find out that Hansen is outside Eric's apartment and calls him. And
Mhm.
so they're like, okay, what do we do? So Kate drives Eric back and drops him around the corner. And Eric says that, he's going to work him, make him feel safe that he can make the drop.
Right. And he says maybe he's a little surlier than usual. The guy's melting down. Which, of course, is correct.
Yeah.
Eric says, I can handle him, which how many times have we heard that before?
But in this case, he's right.
Barely.
No, I don't think. I think let's get into it.
Okay.
So Hansen picks up Eric in the car and they drive to Rock Creek Park.
Mhm.
And as they're driving to Rock Creek Park, they talk about Aldrich Ames, who,
Right.
for our listeners who don't know, is another notorious spy,
Mhm.
and he was CIA. And there's actually a series which I think we'll cover later at some point, which talks about the people who are trying to catch Aldrich Ames, and the lead is one Jodie Whittaker, aka the new Doctor Who.
Hey,
Yeah.
nice. Is it a British series?
It is not. So she plays an American. It's very interesting to see her. I've seen one episode of it, and so it's interesting to see her with an American accent.
That is always interesting. Yes. So so Hansen here, when they're talking about Ames, he points out that
Hmm.
Ames passed every polygraph, which I completely believe.
Hmm.
For those of you who watch Penn and Teller's bullshit, um, they're like polygraphs have no scientific validity, basically.
Hmm.
And but Hansen says he never would have gotten past me. I can read anyone, which of course is very ironic when characters say this. We seem to hear that a lot too in various spy movies.
Yeah. So when they get to Rock Creek Park, Hansen pulls a gun out of an ankle holster. Then he starts
Mhm.
spouting up again about how the agent. Basically, he gives them the pretense of I'm going to teach you how to shoot.
Mhm.
And the agency's a gun culture. You need, or not? The bureau's a gun culture, and you got to learn how to shoot. And he's clearly drunk, and he starts spouting off how they're going to test you, the different ways they can test you. At how many yards from a crouching position, from all that, and he's shooting just randomly into the woods.
Right.
Eric's, he starts shooting the gun near Eric and is like, I need to know if I can trust you. And Eric says, look around you, boss. It's just us out here. No one's tailing you. There isn't any GPS on your car, and I'm not a foreign agent trying to work you. You don't matter that much.
Oh, snap.
And this is why I think he succeeded, because he's basically telling him, so he's beating down his ego. Again, it's all about his ego. So he's beating his ego so much, saying, you don't matter, you're not important. And so in his mind, he's like, what he says is, I matter plenty. And so he's beating that ego down so much so that he's like, no, I need to prove to him. So I want to make one more drop. So which is why I think, like I said, Eric succeeded in what he wanted to do. But as you were saying,
it's a great scene. It's a great scene, but it was ruined by the fact that Eric told us basically one of the first things at his talk was that this whole part didn't happen. But it is cool to watch. It makes for great television. And well, I guess you'll tell me whether he actually did provoke Hanssen into doing a drop one more time.
I will tell you when we get to our section. I know I keep saying that, but there's a lot to cover in there.
Right. So Hanssen prints it. There's a scene of Hanssen printing info and then putting it into a trash bag. And then the day of days, February 18th, 2001.
Yeah, so Hanssen makes the drop in Foxstone Park in Fairfax County in Virginia, underneath a bridge. Agents are watching him do it, and he places a mark on the Foxstone Park sign with chalk.
Right. Which is it's like a signal. This is something that we see signal that there's a drop happening.
Yeah.
But it's like during the day.
Yeah, that's what surprised me.
I guess at night would be even more suspicious. That's my sort of thought.
But yeah, so and there are agents watching him as he's doing this, and as he drives home, the agents arrest him outside of his home, and so he's like, they say hands in the air, and he's like, guns won't be necessary. Guns won't be necessary.
Yeah,
which is a true thing that was said.
His guns are all in his trunk.
Yeah, and then so he sees what's his name? Dean, who you said is the Allstate guy, and he goes to him and says, "Maybe now you'll listen."
It's like Hanssen, he just wanted what we all want, which is to matter. That's nice. Yeah, Hanssen also tells him about the signal burst. And Dean says, you better cooperate. Hanssen talks about how he wants to be appreciated, like we just said, and he's found it very satisfying to be outsmarting everybody.
And as this is happening, Eric gets a page that, saying that they got him. So he knows he wasn't there, but he just, only finds out that way. And then we get Eric cleaning out the office at 9930, and Kate comes in, and Eric basically tells him that I'm thinking about leaving, and Kate's like, you're definitely gonna make agent if you stay, and he's like, I don't know if I want to anymore.
Well, that's something that we see in other spy movies. Like Munich is a really good example. Eric Bana, which we'll cover later. Eric Bana's character did like this crazy intense mission, and when it's over, he's like, I'm done. Apparently, real life spies aren't like James Bond, where they can just save the world every weekend, no problem.
So yes, and Eric, earlier, and there's another call. Like you said, in this scene, there's a lot of callbacks. Like this is where we finally see that, or at least they talk about, the two men on the boat painting, and there's also the pen that early in the movie, Hanssen's like, this is the best pen that they ever make, and I won't use anything except it. And Eric takes the pen, and as he's leaving, and well, I'm already going to spoil part of the spy fact for spy fiction section. This did not happen. First of all, why would you be taking Eric or Robert Hanssen in an elevator that someone else might be using?
Or just in an elevator at all. Like, why was he even there? You'd be in jail, because that's where you put him.
So opens the elevator, and Hansen's there as he's basically like taking in for interrogation and processing with two armed guards, and he tells Eric, "Pray for me," and Eric says, "I will."
Yeah, right.
And then we end with the movie with a text that says, Hanssen is, being held in a supermax prison in Colorado, spends 23 hours a day in solitary confinement, and that Eric left FBI right after this and, practiced law in D.C.
It's crazy to me that Hanssen's in a supermax prison, 23 hours in solitary confinement. I mean, he's dangerous, but not dangerous in that sense. Not like he's going to escape from prison.
apparently,
Uh-huh.
Hansen actually has no idea how he got caught. And he doesn't know
Really?
that it's Eric O'Neill that helped catch
Wow.
him,
So
right?
much for being smarter than everybody.
Yeah, well, because, I mean, if he... So, and he's not allowed to really interact with anyone who might know.
That seems cruel and unusual punishment to me. But I also wonder, maybe it's like you can't let him talk to people because he might just tell them more information.
Yeah, so...
He is still alive.
Yeah,
He's still in
yes,
prison.
as of...
As of early 2020 when we're recording this. Okay, so yes,
Yeah.
please lay it on me. Tell me all the spy fact versus
All right,
fiction. I
so
want to hear it.
Eric O'Neill, there was no pretense about being a sexual deviant. He knew going in that Hansen was, being investigated.
Oh, good. That makes a lot more sense.
hmm So all these, so he would have periodic meetings with what's her name, Kate Burrows. Like I said, one of them was at a restaurant in Crystal City. What else was there? Yeah. So like we said, let's just go get it out of the way right now. The whole scene in the woods where he's shooting it, completely made up. But so, and this is from a video. And what I'm saying now is from a video that's in the Spy Museum in a section called "License to Thrill," which is all about pop culture spies.
Right.
So Eric says that apparently, like, the studio was like, this is an FBI movie, a cop movie. You can't have the bad guy never fire a gun at the good guy. And so they crafted this scene. So Eric actually had a hand in sort of crafting the scene with the producers, apparently. And so to sort of portray basically what Eric had to do on a daily basis of how to convince him that he wasn't being investigated. So even though this specific scene didn't happen, just the tension, the daily tension it portrayed is real.
So it's like a metaphor.
Exactly. Yeah. And also during that, so the scene where he gets the Palm Pilot,
right,
there was not a pretense of the photo being taken. It was actually, what's his name? Rich. Challenge. So basically, Hansen had a habit. Every time he gets up from his, sits down, he takes it because he kept his Palm Pilot in his back pocket. So every time he got up, or he sat down, he took it out, put it on his desk, and he would do it and put it back in. So that was like the habit for him. But as he was about to, so when he did that at one point, Rich, challenged him to the shooting. So it immediately goes to the shooting range. There's no pretense about that.
Right.
And challenged him so much that he actually forgot to do it, forgot to put it back in his pocket. And so when that happened,
I thought in the movie it was far-fetched that he's like, oh, I just saw you out of your photo. Now let's go shoot. This is a little convenient timing.
I don't think it's necessarily convenient time because Rich is the one who paged Eric saying he's out of pocket. So he was keeping an eye on him.
Yeah, no, I meant from like Hansen's perspective.
Maybe.
It's like, oh my gosh, why does everybody want me to like be out of the office today?
And also, Eric wasn't the one who copied the PDA. He actually took it to FBI techs.
Yeah.
And there was more of a sort of intense... So there was nothing about water when that happened. So when Hansen comes out of and says, have you been in an office? He had just flat out lied to his face. No, I didn't know. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. The water thing, that is like... What was that movie where someone's supposed to sign? Oh, is it Inglourious Bastards, where they're like pretend to sign in, but they spill the ink all over the paper? They're like, "Oh, sorry." It's like a sign-in book. Does that sound familiar?
I don't know.
Maybe a listener will know what I'm talking about. All right, keep going.
All right. So, and then apparently, instead of saying what, maybe now you'll listen, when he got arrested, Hansen apparently actually said, "What took you so long?"
Oh, yeah. That's like some serial killer stuff.
Let me see what else we got here. Oh, yeah. So that scene with the video never happened. But
really? What a shocker.
But there was a lot of, tension between Eric and Juliana. And eventually, so he tells her everything.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I'm not sure that is good. Is he allowed to?
add on to all the other complications during this whole time, he's taking law classes too.
Right.
And
What
so,
a guy.
right, and so he did leave right after this, and now he does security consulting, and also does book talks, as we got to listen to.
Does public speaking.
Hmm.
Tells a story.
Yeah, so actually, if you get the audio version book of his book Gray Day, he reads it himself, and so as he's a great storyteller, so it really listens really well. So I would
Nice.
recommend that.
Good.
Also, I visited so there's another spy museum in New York City called Spyscape. And some of the things they have that are from the movie Breach. So they have the Palm Pilot used in the film there, as well as like the park sign for was it Fox Creek?
Yeah, for Fox Creek Park. But those are just props. They weren't
they're
actually
props. Okay. No, but the Spy Museum in DC has the actual Palm Pilot there, as well as one of the handcuffs that Hanssen was arrested in, some of his personal firearms, and yeah.
Nice.
So if you're interested in this movie, I'd recommend reading the book. I'd also recommend going to visit the Spy Museum because they have an exhibit about him and also mentions of him throughout the museum.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that because it's a success and they can actually talk about it, I can see
Mm-hmm.
why they want to give it as much attention as possible.
Mm-hmm. Although, I will say, when I visited the FBI headquarters and got to see their museum area there called FBI Experience, there is zero to no mention of Hanssen because they are not happy about it.
Yeah, I can't really say I blame them for that because although they did catch him, they did start him. So it's embarrassing regardless.
One more thing before we go to our ratings. I want to introduce a new segment. Favorite quote of the movie.
Oh, yeah? Okay,
Yeah.
I got one.
All right.
Well, you can go first since it's your idea.
All right. So mine, I got a few. I got a few. So I like so when they're when he's in the very beginning of the movie when he's in the van and his teammates are like different colored tabs, 5 different fonts. You must spend a weekend at Kinko's on this thing. R.I.P. Kinko's. But
and
no, my actual favorite one is no, your name is clerk and my name is sir, or boss if you can manage. And if I ever catching you in my office again, you'll be pissing purple for a week.
It really sets the tone for their relationship. My favorite quote is, when someone takes shit on you, you don't reschedule. If only that were true.
I'm sorry for rescheduling on you.
No, of course we all reschedule because what are you going to do? Like just not talk to them?
Yeah.
Not all of us are Robert Hanssen. Some of us have to answer to people.
Mm-hmm. All right, so shall we go to our ratings? Our ratings are based on 1 to 10 martinis. What do you think?
So my initial sort of thoughts on it weren't that positive. I felt like it was a very good made-for-TV movie.
Ooh.
Yeah. Well,
really?
Yeah, it's like a lot of people talking, and there wasn't a lot of I didn't feel like there was a lot of momentum behind the story. Also, Hanssen is the best part of the movie, but I still don't feel like we know him any better at the end than we did at the beginning. I wanted to know more about why maybe nobody knows, so it's not fair. But I would have liked to hear more about what makes him tick. What's the deal with the sex stuff versus the religion stuff? We sort of get why he did what he did, but just more about Hanssen and less about Eric fighting with his wife. You don't need that much of it to contribute to his sort of feeling.
I mean, I don't think they did well. That's your opinion. I'll let you have your opinion.
Yeah. So, but then, as I was saying, talking about it a little bit more and going back to think about it again, I like to kind of more. I appreciate what they're trying to do, and it did hold my attention. I'll give it a 6 out of 10 martinis.
All right. Whereas I'm gonna go far more than you. I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10 because I really enjoyed this, and maybe it's because I had the added benefit of reading the book as well, so I really felt like I know more about the story and just sort of seeing how they tell the story. But even when I saw it first time without having read the book, I thought it was really interesting to see what all the different things, and also maybe I think it's really cool that we've met someone who's been involved with this case.
It is really cool. It makes it feel really real, and I'm sure reading the book helps you connect with everybody too. So I imagine that helps.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us. That is it for Breach. Please check us out at the Spy-Fi Guys on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And I've been Zach.
And I've been Christian.
And we are the Spy-Fi Guys signing off.
Thank you for listening to the Spy-Fi Guys. If you enjoyed our podcast, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. The theme song from this podcast is Mistake the Getaway by Kevin MacLeod from Incompetech.com. Licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. Films, books, and television shows reviewed by our podcast are the intellectual property of their respective copyright holders, and no infringement is intended.
This is a personal podcast. Any views, statements, or opinions expressed in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the participants. They do not represent those of people, institutions, or organizations that the participants may or may not be associated with in a professional or personal capacity unless explicitly stated. Any views or opinions are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, or individual.
You can find our podcast on social media at The Spy-Fi Guys on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.